Mr. Chief Justice, I know that you have now had the opportunity to tour the Jackson Center and to see the Jackson Center and, of course, to see the city of Jamestown. But I would like to say at this point in time that as the Jackson Center has a wonderful facility, and a facility that, although Robert H. Jackson did not live in the mansion at the front of this facility, Robert H. Jackson was not a stranger to this facility as a member of the Masons and the Scottish Rites. And so we are honored to have a facility that does have a connection to Robert H. Jackson. But I would also like to say that the facility is not the Robert H. Jackson Center. Although we are here at the facility, the center is much, much more. Because the Robert H. Jackson, along with this facility, is about our programming and the things that we do and the ways that we seek to advance the legacy of Robert H. Jackson. And at this time, I would like to call forward Chaplain Maureen Ravigno to give our invocation.
Good afternoon, dear friends. Let us now be in a spirit of prayer together as we continue with this wonderful day. Creator God, your lovely sun has been made to shine on our gathering this morning that honors our native sons. And for this, we are exceedingly grateful because in this blessing, almost 2,000 students were able to gather here today to learn about the legacy of Justice Robert H. Jackson and to honor the presence of another son of our Western New York region, Chief Justice John Roberts. Generous God, we ask also your continuing blessings upon all here present who have come today in celebration and gratitude for all that this center and gathering represent, as well as upon the lovely luncheon now to be presented to us. May all that is holy inspire and bless us all now and in the days and years to come. May it be so, and may we all, with renewed commitment to the good, proclaim with one grateful voice, Amen.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a very, very exciting day for all of us here. My name is Richard Arcara. I'm a district court judge in the Western District of New York, and I am pleased to be here at the Jackson Center, and I'm both honored and privileged to welcome to Western New York the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John G. Roberts, Jr. As many of you may know, our new federal courthouse in Buffalo was dedicated about a year ago. And we could not be more pleased and proud than when last fall President Obama signed legislation naming the new courthouse after Justice Robert H. Jackson. I think that Roger Parloff, a senior editor for CNN, who listened to all the tapes, the 39 arguments of Justice Roberts, put it best when he commented that the future Chief Justice Roberts, quote, seemed to anticipate every question and responded instantly in complete grammatical sentences, salted with down-to-earth analogies and occasionally wicked wit, end of quote. In 2003, President George Bush appointed John Roberts to the United States Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. Some consider the D.C. Court of Appeals a stepping stone for appointment to the highest court in our land. Thus, it came as little surprise when just 2 years later, President George Bush nominated him to replace Chief Justice Rehnquist as Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He was sworn in September 29, 2005, as the 17th Chief Justice of the United States. At only 50 years of age, Chief Justice Roberts became the youngest Chief Justice since President John Adams appointed John Marshall to the seat in 1801. Since Chief Justice Roberts began his tenure as Chief, the Supreme Court has already tackled and will continue to tackle many legal issues such as health care reform, marriage equality, the proper parameters for excluding evidence in criminal cases, and First Amendment rights, among others. The outcomes of these cases will not only shape federal jurisprudence, but will also have a lasting impact on the lives of American citizens for generations to come. In preparing for today, I read that Chief Justice Roberts often spoke about his great admiration and respect for Justice Jackson. This seems fitting not only because we are privileged to have the Chief Justice here today, speaking at the center, which honors the life and the legacy of Justice Jackson, but also because of the many similarities between Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Jackson. Both are considered outstanding legal writers and scholars. Both rose to the highest levels of government service as both advocates and as judges. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor and privilege to introduce to you the Chief Justice of the United States, Chief Justice Roberts.
It is at this time, and I will say very little to no introduction for John Barrett. But it is at this time I ask John Barrett to come forward.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, friends. Mr. Chief Justice, thank you again for your presence here. I'm here in a Paul Harvey-like capacity. Now the rest of the story. You'll remember that I mentioned in my remarks this morning outside the sabotage case that became Robert Jackson's first big piece of litigation 100 years ago this month. The Jamestown landscape of literature, if you will, at that time, as in many cities, was both a morning and an afternoon paper. Jamestown had the Morning Post, and it had the afternoon Jamestown Journal. And of course, today it has the Post Journal. In these days, the Morning Post was a Democratic paper. And the Jamestown Journal, the afternoon paper, was a Republican paper, if you will. And I wanted simply to share with you some of the Jamestown Journal, Jamestown Evening Journal afternoon paper headlines. It begins on May 1st. Strike was declared at early hour today, and it's just a little front page box. And then shortly thereafter comes 8 men arrested on very serious charges, which is the description of the vandalism. They did it not downtown where I think the policing was more of an issue. They went sort of up the lake and in the Lakewood area and so forth, where the traction lines and the trolley companies reached all the way up to Chautauqua, indeed to Mayville. That's where they chopped their poles and cut the wires and wedged the switches and so forth. The next day, 5 men confessed to damaging property on street railway lines. You can see the momentum of prosecution. Meanwhile, another wild night of riot in the streets of city on Monday. And then 3 nights of riot make strenuous work for police and sheriff. Perhaps the afternoon paper was also law enforcement's paper. And then soon grand jury convened in Mayville. And then indictments returned in grand jury at Mayville. And then an interesting box on the front page which says, Frank Mott appointed to position. You see, Frank Mott was the Jamestown lawyer who Jackson was apprenticing for. Frank Mott was a Democratic politico, represented the Labor Council, did all manner of litigation. And in that June 1913 period, a new Democratic governor in the state of New York, William Sulzer, nominates Mott to be the counsel to the State Public Service Commission. That's an Albany job, and that's what pulls Mott into the political orbit and out of the practice orbit. The arraignments are where Jackson makes his appearance. Now, why wasn't Jackson admitted to practice? He was 21. He had taken and passed the New York State bar exam earlier in 1913. The answer is that New York State required 3 years of law preparatory training before one could be admitted to the bar. Counterpart rules are in effect today, and most satisfy it in law school. Jackson, of course, had spent only 1 year in law school, and before that a year as an apprentice, and now was late in, but still in, a 2nd year as an apprentice. He asked Judge Ottaway, who's presiding at Mayville, to let him take over this defense, and the district attorney, a fellow named Green, readily consent. And so that is the granting of the motion, and then that's the commencement of the first trial. Jackson's client was actually a fellow named Gaynor. The cases were being tried in a serial fashion. And the DA presents his first 4 witnesses and then rests, at which point Jackson makes his motion under New York's penal law, which prohibited cases based on solely accomplice testimony. In other words, cooperators, people who had cut a deal, no independent witnesses. So Jackson wins this one case But in a sense, it's the collapse of the entire prosecution of the strikers. And so it's an interesting glimpse of sort of starting small and working diligently and knowing your stuff and being ready, leading onward and upward to big things. And my connection, Mr. Chief Justice, as you grace us and honor us with your presence, is to the Jackson Center. The Jackson Center was an idea, maybe a harebrained idea is the way to describe it. And from that early moment, that youthful moment, that not yet admitted to anything, not yet qualified to do anything, moment of brilliance and vision and preparation over the ensuing 12 years has grown this center and this series of accomplishments, this testament to a great life, the teaching that we're all committed to, and the presence of the Chief Justice of the United States. Thank you, sir.
I have to follow the Jackson scholar. Chief Justice Roberts, that's cruel and unusual punishment. Before this congressional gig got my way, I was a teacher of history and economics at Buffalo State College. And when I was first elected to Congress in 2005, I met Greg Peterson and truly did not know anything about Justice Jackson. But I knew of the founding mission and the vision of those who founded this great center. And it was to impart not only knowledge about this extraordinary Western New Yorker, but curiosity about this extraordinary American. And what's often, I think, put aside is the extraordinary ability that Jackson had to communicate through the spoken word, but also the written word. And the law and words mean nothing unless they are spoken in a compelling way and with great eloquence. Lawrence Tribe, the great constitutional scholar, characterized Jackson as the most piercingly eloquent writer in the history of the United States Supreme Court. And the greatest thing that you can do, it's not IQ, it's CQ. It's the curiosity quotient. And you instill an appreciation in all those kids for the extraordinary work that Judge Jackson did and the extraordinary place that he holds in the American legal tradition. But Greg, the Buffalo Courthouse would not have been named the Robert H. Jackson Federal Courthouse without you in the Jackson Center. There were a lot of people that thought it should be named for Wild Bill Donovan, an extraordinary, colorful, unique American from Western New York, and they made compelling arguments. But in the final analysis, after all the facts were gathered and analyzed and presented in the great tradition of Jackson, you won out. But this would not have been done without you. So I wanted to present to you personally a copy of the bill signed by President Barack Obama naming the new federal courthouse in Buffalo for Associate Justice Robert H. Jackson. There you go, my friend.
So much. Thank you, Paul.
I would now like to introduce Professor David Crane, the chairman of our board, for a few closing remarks. Thank you.
And lastly, the Chief Justice, we all have moments in our lives. We all note historic moments. I would just like to say, Mr. Chief Justice, just thank you for the moment. It's been deeply appreciated, and we wish you all the best in your tenure. And remember, the Jackson Center is here, and come back if you would, please. Thank you. I believe that concludes the ceremonies, and thank you all for coming.